From The Australian, here's What's on the Front. I'm Kristen Amiot. It's Tuesday, January 14. Plans for the Prime Minister's first face-to-face meeting with President-elect Donald Trump have yet to firm up. But Anthony Albanese says an upcoming Quad meeting between Australia, India, Japan and the United States could provide the perfect opportunity.
When I had the discussion with the incoming president, we discussed the Quad. We had a discussion there about those details, but they occur diplomatically, and we will get that organised appropriately.
Items from Barry Humphrey's private collection will be sold at auction in London next month. The comedian's late son, Oscar Humphreys, says his father lovingly built the collection, which includes the iconic glasses he donned as Dame Edna Everage over 7 decades. You can read that story right now at theaustralian.com.au. Anthony Albanese contends he can solve Australia's economic woes through a cash splash, and he's starting with the National Broadband Network. The Prime Minister announced the government will spend $3 billion on the NBN to finish the project started by his Labor predecessors. But will it win an election? That's today's episode. If you're an Australian of a certain age, this sound is probably equal parts nostalgic and annoying. It was a simpler time on the internet when your mum had to hound you off the computer in order to make a phone call from the family landline, when websites were pixelated and finite in a way that feels quaint compared with today's World Wide Web, and when you could quite literally ask the government to remove offensive content.
Since the legislation came into effect on January 1 this year, the government body charged with applying the legislation through an online complaint hotline has received only 90 complaints, leading to 27 takedown notices.
I think I was in grade 6 and we got internet and it was very exciting.
Greg Brown is the Australian's Canberra Bureau Chief.
I think I tried to look up some cricket scores or something like that, and the dial-up took a long time to get any information, let alone watching videos or anything. That was impossible. So I think when you look back on what the internet was like all those years ago in the 1990s, it's hard to imagine that it's so fast these days, and it's just pull out your phone and you can Google anything.
Fast forward to 2007, when the whole world was online. Fledgling social networks, global travel and international business dealings demanded faster and more powerful internet connections. It was then, following a federal election victory, that the Rudd government pledged to get Australia literally up to speed.
Ask anyone in the IT industry what faster broadband would mean for Australia, and they'll tell you it would change everything.
It's going to change the way we work, live, play and learn.
And thus, the National Broadband Network was born. Labor's plan was to have 93% of Australian households connected to the internet via a national fibre to the premises network, or FTTP, by the middle of 2021. Basically, that means most households would be tethered to the internet via fibre optic cables, which can carry a lot more data a lot faster over long distances than traditional copper wires. The first customers were connected in Tasmania in 2010, in a rollout the Australian later described as shambolic and abysmal.
A devastating strategic review found cost blowouts and delays had plagued the nation's biggest infrastructure project, with significant queues in connections and disputes over construction-related contracts.
For a whole lot of reasons we'll get into later, that 2021 deadline came and went with about 90% of Australian premises connected to the NBN. And now the Labor government has pledged to get it over the finish line.
Labor created the National Broadband Network, and only Labor will finish the NBN and, importantly, keep the NBN in public hands. Today we're announcing an equity injection of $3 billion into the NBN. The NBN Co will contribute more than $800 million to this project.
So they're going to bring nearly all the remaining premises, homes and businesses that don't have the fibre all the way to their door. So it's basically going to be fibre for, I think, 95% of the network, which was the original dream of Kevin Rudd. Obviously, this changed under the former coalition government. Initially, it was cheaper to have fibre to the node and then copper going out to each individual home and business. But now they're saying that the government will put more money into it so that every household has the fastest possible NBN experience.
On Monday, Communications Minister Michelle Rowland claimed this multi-billion-dollar equity injection into Australia's biggest ever infrastructure project would keep internet plans affordable, but she didn't really say how.
Now, it is the case that many Australians are choosing to use 5G networks, and that is their choice. But the absolute truth is this, that fibre is regarded across the world, and certainly by NBN Co, as the standard when it comes to ensuring the highest quality broadband services. And that is because nothing is faster than the speed of light.
With a federal election just around the corner, both the major parties are making their pitch to Australians struggling under a cost of living crisis. So could cheaper internet plans get Labor over the line?
This goes very much into the philosophical economic debate that we're seeing in the very early stages of this. It's not even an election campaign yet, but Albanese and Dutton have both been out campaigning. So Anthony Albanese, his slogan is building Australia's future, and it's very much about government spending. He was in Queensland and Western Australia and the Northern Territory last week. There was a $7 billion announcement to upgrade the Bruce Highway. There was packages in all the little towns he went about government money for housing and smaller infrastructure projects. And the point really being is that government, under his vision, has a big role to play. Whereas in Peter Dutton, he was saying in his first speech over the weekend that it would be private enterprise that needs to lead the economic recovery in the future. So Peter Dutton, on the one hand, is saying we want government to get out of the way and have the right settings for private enterprise, but Albanese is saying there is an active role for government to play. And I think we're seeing that with this NBN announcement, that the government is committing $3 billion more to a public entity. And a big part of this as well is they are warning that the coalition has a secret plan to privatise the NBN. Now, there's no evidence for that, but Labor is saying that they will be the only ones that will keep it in public hands, and therefore they will keep prices down.
Coming up, inside the fight for the internet in Australia. When the Rudd government first announced it would embark upon the biggest and arguably one of the most ambitious infrastructure projects in Australia's history, it wasn't necessarily in it for the long run. Following an initial investment of about $40 billion from the government and private stakeholders, the Treasury estimated the NBN would start paying for itself by that 2021 deadline, with Labor's $30 billion investment paid off by the mid-2030s. Then it said it would sell off the NBN within 5 years of its completion. But this is where the current Labor government's plan diverges.
Now, last year in the House of Representatives, we had a vote in the Parliament to keep the NBN in public hands. And Peter Dutton and the Coalition opposed that vote. When the Senate sits again next time, they will have a choice of whether they do support the NBN staying in public hands or whether they will again vote to allow for the NBN to be flogged off to private interests.
The Productivity Commission estimates the NBN is worth about $20 billion, significantly less than the $35 billion that's been splashed on its rollout since 2008. So how will Labor foot the bill if it gets up at the next election? Here's Greg Brown.
This is another increase in spending that what they say is goes off budget. So it's not reflected in the forward estimates, but it still leads to overall national debt. The broader answer to your question, though, is that neither side is showing signs that they will be putting up revenue measures to be able to pay off debt at a faster rate. And so Anthony Albanese has been out and made more than $10 billion of spending announcements this year alone. And when I actually asked him on the road last week what revenue measures he would have to offset this, he didn't have an answer. And I think the answer is that bracket creep is really the key to bringing the budget back into balance. And that's not forecast to happen for another decade. So the old era of both sides of politics being fiscally prudent, which was the case for really most of the 20th century, or certainly the latter half of the 20th century, that's really eroding at the moment.
The political argy-bargy over ownership is just another stop on the NBN's long road to fruition. In 2010, then opposition leader Tony Abbott vowed to demolish the NBN if and when the coalition won government. He wouldn't get his chance until 2013, and while the coalition didn't exactly go around ripping up cables, it did make some significant changes to the NBN. Most notably, former Communications Minister Malcolm Turnbull chucked out the existing NBN board and implemented a new technology mix that would take the focus off FTTP. Costs blew out, as did the delivery timeline. When he became PM, Turnbull blamed the Rudd and Gillard governments for the delays. And now Anthony Albanese says the job would have been done if the coalition just stuck with the plan.
They didn't understand that the NBN is about productivity. It's absolutely critical to the way that a modern economy and a modern society functions.
I just think a lot of Australians have not had a positive experience from using the NBN, and a lot of people think it's been one big waste of money. It is interesting that the government is really putting so much political capital in this because clearly they think they're onto a winner. But I think people have mixed views about it. Increasingly, people are using 5G. And while Labor might say the reason you've had a bad experience with the NBN is because the coalition didn't do it properly, I just think people, in a broader sense, think NBN and it's no good. They're not thinking about whether the coalition or Labor delivered it poorly. They just didn't have a good experience of it. So I'm sure the research is telling them that people don't want the NBN to be privatised, and that's why they're ramping up this fear campaign on it. I'm not convinced it will be a vote winner for them.
Greg Brown is the Australian's Canberra Bureau Chief. You can read that story as well as all the nation's best news, sport, politics and business right now at theaustralian.com.au.